I enhance women on the outside to ignite the inside and help them achieve their dreams and goals. I want to talk to you about one of my favorite books, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. This book was written by Dr. Suzanne Jeffers, and it's probably one of my favorite because it was one of the very first books I read on my self-help journey. And I was afraid of life. I was afraid of everything. And so she talked about feeling the fear and doing it anyway. I have to admit, it has been years since I have read that book, probably 30 years. But one of the lessons really stuck with me, and that was that no matter what, when we do something new, we are going to be afraid. For me, I feel like that's my adventure component in life, right? I travel to new places. I put myself in situations where I'm not certain. I don't have that certainty. I don't have that control. So there's a little bit of fear because I don't know what's going to happen. I remember on a trip to Auckland, I'm super afraid of heights. I decided to jump off the Auckland Tower because I was afraid of heights. And I wanted to show my kids that even though I was afraid of heights, I was still going to conquer that fear. Before, I used to feel fear and decide to stop. I thought, hey, I'm afraid. I'm uncomfortable. I don't want to do this. But now what I realize is you feel fear, and if you're trying something new, you're gonna have to feel the fear and do it anyway. Kind of like the title of the book, right? Feel the fear and do it anyway. The next thing I learned was that if I was growing, I would always have fear. I didn't want to feel fear. I had a very narrow comfort zone where I was totally mature and had everything under control. I didn't want to leave it, right? I had to reposition fear. I had to realize that if I'm feeling fear, I'm actually growing. This is a good thing. So always have that healthy amount of fear, what we call eustress, right? There's distress, where you have stress, but it's shutting us down. And we are feeling overwhelmed, we're not performing, we're pushing people away, we're pushing situations away. We want a cocoon, just go and hide on the sofa, eat some comfort food, and hide under a blanket. So that is distress. What we're talking about is eustress, okay? So we want a little bit of good stress. Good stress, for example, when we're lifting dumbbells, right? At the gym, lifting weights is a good stress on the muscle because it makes the muscle grow just a little bit. I started doing a bunch of things that I was totally afraid of. So I was totally afraid of talking to people. I started talking to strangers. I was very afraid of making small conversation because as an engineer, I was really good at deep conversations, meaningful conversations, which I could only have with people that I knew really well. But just making small conversation and getting to know people and getting them to open up without having to go into the deep conversation. So every time I was afraid, I started making presentations in front of my peers. I started making presentations in front of my supervisors. But slowly and surely, I realized that I had to put myself out there and get rid of some of these fears. And I'll tell you now, none of those things cause me any fear, right? So once you've built the muscle, picking up something is not that hard anymore, and we don't even have to think about it. It doesn't take as much time. It doesn't take as much effort. We do it so easily. Final message I got from this book is, you know what? Brave people are also afraid. So just because you're brave doesn't mean you have no fear. It means we don't succumb to our fear, right? So when we see a situation and it takes a little extra courage, a little bit of bravery, we're still afraid. It doesn't mean that it totally goes away, but we're gonna go ahead and do that anyways. I remember my friend in Colorado wanted to go whitewater rafting, and I was not at all looking forward to it. Part of it was, going over rocks in the river. The other thing was I really didn't want to get wet, and it was a real big active sport. But I was like, hey, what the heck? Let's go whitewater rafting. So we spent half a day going on the raft. It was so much fun. I actually enjoyed the ups and downs. And afterwards, when we got to the shore and we're on this pretty beach, she goes, let's go horseback riding. Again, I was afraid. I'm not a horse person, I'm not an animal person, and I'm afraid of heights. And how high up are we when we're on the top of a horse? Pretty high up, right? So I didn't want to be there. But once we do one little fear, we can do another one and another one. So anytime I have an opportunity and the opportunity causes me that fear, I reframe it. So what does that mean? Instead of looking at it as a bad thing, I can fall off the horse, I can break my neck, people are going to laugh at me, what if I get hurt? Reframe it as, this is something that I can do and grow. This is a new experience for me. It'll be easier for me to do it again. So we reframe it as to what are the benefits that can come out of engaging in this experience. Since I had come to the States at 5 years old, I was always told that I was so bad at English. First, I didn't speak as well as the other kids. Then my penmanship wasn't as good as the other kids. In my 4th grade, my vocabulary wasn't as good as the other kids. So anytime I had to do anything where I had to write a lot in English, math, universal language, I never had a problem, but writing a lot in English, it would just cause me anxiety. And on top of that, to make the book good, I had to be open and vulnerable. So my vulnerability, writing in English, and then my vulnerability about the emotional states of my life. What I realized was that being vulnerable and telling more about myself actually made the book more enjoyable to my readers, and it got me over that fear. Part of the reason I wrote that book was to help people, but the other half was to help me and get me over my fear that I was not good at English and I could not write in English. So Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Dr. Suzanne Jeffers. If you have fear, embrace it. It's eustress, depending on how you look at it. You want to always be growing, and when we're growing, we're gonna have fear, right? Also, doing little things that we're afraid of will help us do bigger things that we're afraid of. And that's the best way to live. Always getting bigger in our emotional capacity, in our spiritual capacity, in our physical capacity, in our circle of friends, because we want to go through life growing, not shriveling up. My name is Rina. Definitely click the link below and get my dream life creation. Thanks so much for watching.